Howdy. Sorry for the delay. I have been on the road. I didn't mean to keep everybody hanging on this series about talking about weeds. It's been very busy. If you can see behind me, the sun is shining, and that's great. That storm that I had come through was phenomenal with what blew through here, and we have another one coming in a few days. But for now, I will take the sunshine. I just got back from Florida for the Florida Pest Management Association. As many of you know who've been following around for a while, I'm very active in the Florida Pest Management Association. This year becoming their allied representative to be a voice speaking for the vendors, with the vendors, on how to make the expo better. But it was a phenomenal expo. A lot of people there. Actually had some people come in from out of state. Jeremy Lagasse, who came in from Maine to come down to the FPMA. I hope it was a very beneficial show for you. Even though he's not a member of the Florida Pest Management Association, there's a lot that can be gained by coming to that particular expo, especially if you're in pest control. So it was good to see you there. As far as everybody else, thank you. It was a tremendous show. It was nice to get to see all the old faces and so many new people who came and sat in on my CEU course and talked to me afterwards and shared their information as well about their companies and everything that they do. So that was super cool. Now, I guess this is getting back into the reason you're all here. Now, in Florida, I did a presentation, and up at the upcoming Lawncology Summit, I'll be digging into this a little bit more. And if you're on my blog, there's a new article posting that gets into some of this stuff as well, so that you can kind of start getting it from all the media that I'm putting out there. But we're talking about weeds as like biological markers. And I tied this into a course down there, a presentation, basically about soil, reading your soil, understanding your soil, feeding your soil properly, and looking at biological markers, weeds being one of them. Now, here's how I'm going to start this one. I like to read. I love to read. I've got a bunch of books that I go through, a fairly decent stack of them. I wish I had a library. They end up, once I've gone through them a few dozen times, they end up in a bin. But there's a couple that I'm going to point out that I think everybody would really, really appreciate who want to go down this rabbit hole. Now, I'm going to share information on a particular level that'll help kind of guide you through certain aspects of what weeds are telling you, and then there is a much deeper level. Now, I just gave one book. I don't have it with me right now. I gave it to Paul Castleberry to look at. May have been the first book written on the subject from Joseph Kochenauer. You can find this. It's called Weeds, Guardians of the Soil. Now, it's not necessarily like a guidebook, as it were, on identifying deficiencies as to why weeds are there, but it does talk about a lot of the benefits and what they could be potentially telling you about the soil and how it's just an oft overlooked item. So the second one, though, this is something that I think everybody should take a look at. Weeds control without poisons. I'm going to put a link to this in the product description. I actually had it in the last one, but I didn't talk about it. Charles Walters, Acres USA, puts this book out. It is available on Amazon, also on the Acres USA website. This particular one really does drive into it, and it goes back and forth and references Joseph Kochenauer as well. And honestly, I don't know if I'm saying his name right. That's just, I can't find anybody who can pronounce it. That's just what it sounds like. But that's a really good one. One of my most worn out books, I would say, is this one, this Hands-on Agronomy. I love this. It's just fantastic if you want to really dig into the soil, and there's all kinds of info about that. But getting back to the topic at hand, this particular piece, I guess if you want to look at it as like plant or soil pathology or deficiencies and how it shows up in plant growth, it's not new. But we just don't get, it doesn't get enough attention. There's so much time that's being spent on quickly controlling weeds that there's not enough saying, hey, we Well, that was completely and totally lame. I just switched over to the GoPro now because this camera, which I use all the time, just got like some overheating button. I put it up to like the maximum, I don't know, it's shooting in very large video, whatever that is. It's like 4K, 60 frames, and apparently the camera can't handle it for more than 5 minutes. So, hey, it's GoPro time. I'm sorry if the audio changes, and we'll go from here. I love doing these in one take, and that just totally ruined my thought process. Where I was, though, before I was so technologically rudely interrupted, was too much time is being spent on how to eradicate weeds and not enough looking at why are they there and what could we correct to balance the soil enough to not have that issue anymore. So, in overall, a good general amount of weeds that you're seeing in lawns are coming from three things. I can almost narrow it down to three things. Typically, you're looking at either compaction, too much or too loose soil, so it's going to be both sides of that. So compaction, either too much or too loose a soil. Water, either too much or too little, or I would say, well, maybe there could be four things. Organic matter, that's a huge one. That's really more of what you're going to be dealing with. So we can talk about plants like this. We have a certain amount of low growing weeds that come in, like prostrate spurge or purslane, that type of thing. More of like a sprawling weed, that moves across laterally. And oftentimes that's showing up for a very perfect and logical reason. And if you read over into the blog, I'm going to talk about those two in particular, because this is how we're going to start down this process. Oftentimes this is going to be where soil is exposed. Exposed soil is the biggest enemy of the soil. Direct sunlight on open earth is absolutely the worst for what you would ever have in a lawn. And think about it this way. Typically around curbs, sidewalks, driveways, paving stones, things like that. That's your entry point for weeds. And it's not because your weed control didn't get in there. It's because you've got a soil exposure on a certain level that the sun is really baking. And in those areas, perfect place for seed to germinate. And oftentimes it is to cover that up. Now, if you think about it, if the weeds didn't grow there and you were edging your driveway or whatever at an angle that was exposing soil, and you didn't get those weeds to cover, the soil would heat up to a point where the grass would start to die back. And it would almost look like an entry point for an insect. And oftentimes that is an entry point for an insect, is to come in right there where there's exposure to the soil. So this is coming just from heat and exposure, direct sunlight in there, drying out organic matter, drying out soil life, basically robbing carbon from the ground. And then these weeds will come in and park themselves over it to shade or to drive in there to allow greater water penetration or things like that. So when you take a look at, say, a dandelion root, you've got a massive tap root and some other branch roots that come off of that thing, and it goes deep into the earth. I mean, they can go feet down into the ground. And the point of that plant is to basically transfer these deep nutrients that are down below the grass root level, pull it up into the depleted soil on top, and redistribute it back out as the plant decays. So you have a significant amount of biomass that's up there taking in a sort of umbrella shape and covering up and then pulling from deep down. And in the more compacted ground, and especially this is a cool season weed. So at the beginning of the year, in some places, and I know here in Utah this happens a lot, they've got some clay components to the soil, so it can get pretty bound up, and especially after being heavily, I'm not going to say too much water, but with winter and snow melt and everything else, you get an area where there's a lack of oxygen, somewhat of a lack of drainage, and those dandelion roots will drive down to open, split the earth enough to allow the water to get down in there. When that weed dies, leaves behind this root system that becomes soil food. and it has allowed tunnels for air and water and nutrients to flow down deeper into the soil. And it would be the same if it were dry. If it was all dried out, same type of thing. You get these massive tap-rooted weeds that just drive down into the soil to crack it open and try to pull some of this moisture back up into where the turf grass is. So that's one piece of it. Now, as far as nutrients go, oftentimes you're looking at a few very basic things. A lot of weeds are driving so down deep into the soil that they're hunting for available calcium and move that up into the topsoil. And they're just kind of moving this material up, stuff that could be locked out, stuff that's too deep for grassroots. And if you're like, average grassroot depth is 2.5 or 3 inches deep, you're missing a significant amount of nutrients that have just passed through. So weeds can actually get in there and pull some of that material up. But now I had some people ask about certain things, like wild violets was one. This is clearly just a case of poor drainage, compacted soil, too much moisture in that area. You need to really dry it out. Mow those suckers down low and let it dry out. That's going to be one of the best things you could ever do, just because it likes that moist and anaerobic soil condition, okay? So that would be the part 2 of some of this, is a lot of weeds are showing up because of anaerobic soil activity, and their root systems are going to branch into an area to allow more airflow. More airflow turns that around so that you're actually getting a positive impact or aerobic bacterial interface instead of having an anaerobic. So it can be compaction that's causing that. It can be waterlogging that's causing that. It could be just tight clays, lack of infiltration. Any of those things could contribute to an anaerobic soil condition. So when you go out on your lawn, this is the thing that you're going to be looking for. What types of weeds are you seeing? Are you seeing sprawling, low-growing plants that are covering up more bare spots in your soil? Are you seeing weeds with deep tap roots that are driving down? Are you seeing, crabgrass? What are these items that you're seeing? Because so many of them have a role, and it is to protect the soil. So in most cases, it's going to come down to this. Now, in the last video, I mentioned how we've been dosing and flooding humic out, and there's the video that is on right now while I'm talking was actually the first time we did that. That's me riding around on the back of a trailer on a tractor in Georgia when we were first emptying our tanks after we had first moved there, getting that stuff spread out. You can see how I just painted that whole thing black. That is a roughly 140 gallon a minute pump that's just totally choked down to a 1/2 inch openings. That's why it's spraying like 60 feet out. But that was how we did it in the beginning. That turned out to be just a silly way to do things. But getting out into that field that had all this wild onion and dandelion and you name it, it was in that field. We've eliminated most of those weeds without putting any weed killers out, just because of such a massive dose in the change of airflow, in the change of available calcium, because we're unlocking all this material, the loading up of potassium that's going out there. You name it, there's such a massive change in the soil that weeds no longer grow. So that's where I have to end this one, unfortunately. I hope that it didn't let you down, because there's so much on this to talk about. It's a lot to deal with. So in the meantime, what I want to do, I want to make sure that this, if you guys want to dig in, take a look at this book. Grab it if you want. There's an index in the back that shares an awful lot of info. This is like weeds, talks about them, draws them out. You can get in there and really get into some fun stuff with that particular book. This is a really good compounding knowledge book. If you really want to dig into some soil science and a fun read, Hands-on Agronomy. Hands-on Agronomy. I love Neal Kinsey. I love the way he writes. I think that this is just a wonderful book for a good understanding. Maybe this is over the head of some people. Maybe it's not. you know, if you want to get into it, if anybody's looking for any soil books or things to drive into this, I'd be more than happy to recommend a few. I always have a bunch laying around and travel with them and stuff. So I'm going to try to dig into a couple more specifics in the next video. I'm hoping to shoot that like tomorrow and the next day, so I can just have that done. This one was a little bit rushed out, but I know everybody was waiting for something. So that's all I got for now. I got to go pick up my kids from school, so I'll talk to y'all real soon.